For this session, I wrote 150 words.
I am at 2,783 words in my second manuscript.
For this session, I wrote 330 words, and my week's total word count is 796 words.
I am at 3,074 words for my second manuscript.
For this session, I wrote 92 words.
In my second manuscript, I am now a little past 3,000 words. I wrote 4 days this week, Sunday through Wednesday, and I will have to say, I think that is plenty for me. Next week, I think I'm going to shoot for about 3 more writing sessions and maybe a bonus 4th, but I don't think I'm going to extend myself past a 4th session for my second manuscript. I am loving my progress in that so far. And as of yesterday, I have chapter 1 complete. It has also been edited, and I think it's rather polished. I am really glad that I got feedback early on for chapter 1, even before chapter 1 was complete, because that helped me really generally assess the common mistakes I was making. Chiefly that there were some areas I just needed to add a few more words and tighten up the phrasing a little bit more, or even expand in the sentence a little bit more to add more clarity to the story. But overall, the feedback that I have received have been generally positive in that my pacing is great, my characters are interesting already in chapter 1, and my world feels magical. And those are the qualities that I was shooting for. My husband especially, who has seen me through my writing journey, commented that my writing for the second manuscript is leagues apart from when I first started my hand in fiction. And given that the comment was unsolicited, he just expressed that freely, I knew that that was a sign I was on the right track. Over the years in my writing journey, I have also learned to develop a sharper critical eye for what I write, and I think that's something that we all learn along the way. It can be very difficult to be objective or more objective about your own writing at first, but with practice reading many books with a more analytical eye, I think that has been the largest contributor to my abilities in critically assessing my own work. I think how you read books really makes a difference in your abilities to analyze your own works. So reading just for fun I don't think that's enough to be able to develop that skill. However, I do think that you can read for fun and study as well, in that so long as you're keeping in mind the how of the author's writing, I think that's enough to help get your mind in the right direction to figure out more of the magic of sentence writing. This is less about grammar and syntax than it is about paying attention to how you experience reading a sentence or paragraph or a series of descriptions and dialogue, because ultimately readership is first and foremost about the experience. And if you pay attention to the experience you're having reading certain books, you'll begin to see where that experience is being created, whether it be through a certain structuring of the descriptions or the way that the dialogue flows between characters, things like that. In a way, it is a form of language learning, and a lot of language learning actually happens intuitively. That said, intuitively does not mean negligently or totally passively. It just means tuning in just enough to be like, I feel something in this and I wonder why, and inquiring further in that direction. So study doesn't have to be necessarily poring over the books that you're reading and breaking it down word by word and sentence by sentence. I think it's more of just simply tuning into the experience you're having with the book and paying attention to how the structures support that experience, or even seeing how the structures don't support the experience you're really looking for. I think it's important to read widely and read things that you may not necessarily agree with, that you're still kind of interested in, because I think interest is important. And then taking a moment to consider why something didn't work for you, or why something was dry or boring or disengaging. Practicing that, I think, translates then into your abilities to analyze your own work. My point in sharing all this is that what I've learned is that writing isn't just about getting your awesome ideas down on paper and making it into a story. It's also very much the ability to curate what you're writing to create the very effect and experience that you are looking for. So it's not even just the story, it's also very much the feel. And I haven't heard many people talk about this aspect of writing, which is also about the feel and the experience, other than it being kind of stuffed under the umbrella of style. But my thinking is that there is a bit of a different access when you conceptualize experience a little separately from style. To give a bit of an example, when you're thinking, I have to have style in my writing versus what is the experience I want to create, I think the latter allows you to write more truly to what you want to accomplish, and the former can be kind of a hindrance. That's just my personal take and what has worked for me to figure out how to write what I want to write. And that all said, with my second manuscript, I know I'm hitting all the marks that I've wanted to hit with this project. From here on out, all that I really need to do is follow that general structure I have established in chapter 1. And this is also why I did put a little bit more effort into my first chapter and making sure that it was polished, because that's going to be my foundation for the rest of my book. Obviously, the information throughout subsequent chapters will change, but I am staying true with the setup I have established from chapter 1 as my foundation to pace out the rest of my story. Pacing isn't just about tempo or cadence, it is also about how a reader is able to process and digest the information that you give in the story. And so if across the board I'm getting feedback that my pacing is on point, I am sticking with that. And this coming from people who enjoy reading and who have good taste in reading, I mean, that is gold to me. On to the next thing I want to talk about. So, books. Goodwill books first. I found a copy of Dracula, which I've actually never read before because I used to be a little bit too afraid to read it. Horror is not really my genre, and when I was young, I was scared that Dracula would terrify me to no end, but I definitely want to read this at some point, so I picked this up. Number 2, I found a copy of The Wasteland. And then number 3, I found this book called Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art by James Nestor. On a day-to-day basis, I generally practice a lot of breath work with no formal training, just very intuitively. So I'm very interested to learn about the science of it through this book. Lastly, for my book haul, this is not from Goodwill. I purchased this from eBay. I got the Skyrim Library, the 3-book collection. The first volume is The Histories. The second volume is Man, Mare, and Beast. And then the third one is The Arcane. And let me tell you why I invested in these books. Because having watched my husband play Skyrim, the world building is incredible. The lore in Skyrim is just so mind-blowing. The visuals are astounding, and I think there's a lot to be learned from Skyrim's ability to storytell through the game interface and, also through the books. One of my favorite discoveries in Skyrim is the word wall. I think there's another name for it, but I'm not totally familiar with that yet. And I actually forgot because my husband did teach me about it. But the general premise is there are these sacred walls inscribed with, I guess, the dragon language, because the dragons are the ones who created these word walls. Again, I'm not exactly sure if I'm correct on that. But anyways, there are these walls in Skyrim with sacred words inscribed on them, and if you're dragonborn, you can go and find these walls, stand in front of it, and absorb its power. And that process is called learning shouts. And these shouts, there are 3 parts to it, and every wall only gives you 1 part to the shout. But once you have the trinity of a shout learned or acquired, then you have these special magical powers associated with that particular shout. And I thought that was so cool, that was so well thought out, and I want to learn from Skyrim so that I can also build out my world in a very interesting way. Having learned about these word walls, I now look at my life a little bit differently, in the sense that every time I use Google Dictionary, I pretend I'm in front of a word wall and that I'm, learning shouts. And it's fun. It makes my day-to-day life a bit more magical. And then after I learn these shouts, aka maybe synonyms of a word, then if I come across it in another book or just elsewhere in my life, or even if I think of it to use in my own writing, I feel that it's, divine sent. I feel as if the dragons are blessing me with the magic of words. Last on this agenda, tomorrow, my husband and I are leaving for Chicago for the weekend. We will be up at 4 a.m. to catch an early flight. And that said, I will still be doing my daily writing. I printed out the last 4 pages of my manuscript to use as a reference, and then I'm going to either type out my words, my session on my phone, or from my Bluetooth keyboard that I brought that connects to my phone. And then for the trip, I am bringing this book to read. I started Invitation to a Beheading by Vladimir Nabokov in November, and I don't remember if I talked about it, but I'm slow reading this and I'm annotating with my dog ear annotations, and I got to page 38 and it is incredible. It's not too dark, surprisingly, and it's just so beautifully written. So I'm excited to get into this at the airport and hopefully during some downtimes in our travels. That is it for this vlog, and I will see you in the next one.